Good evening. This is the Walpole Zoning Board of Appeals. Tonight is Wednesday, December 16th. Oh, sorry, you're right. Monday. Monday.
Off to a good start.
Thank you. Monday, December 16th. And we have a special meeting this evening, and this is to discuss the waivers for the comprehensive permit for Burns Avenue, and this is a 40B application before the Zoning Board of Appeals. Tonight with us, we have Paul Haverty, who is a ZBA technical assistant on this. We have Town Council, George Pucci, Amy Messier, the Administrative Secretary for the Zoning Board of Appeals, Ashley Clark, Economic Development for the Town of Walpole, Member Bob Fitzgerald, I'm John Lee, Suzanne Murphy, Jane Coffey, Rick Merrickin, and Associate Member Drew Delaney. So, what we have to look at for tonight is a number of waivers that have been proposed in this process. We've been working on this for a number of months, and now it's time to go and sit through the discussion of whether the Zoning Board of Appeals will grant these waivers, or if not, for what reasons, if reasons are required. So there were a number of waivers requested, and what we're going to do is we're going to go through the waivers as a board with guidance from Ashley and Town Council and Paul to make sure that we do everything correctly on this. So this is no longer a hearing where we're going to be taking information from the public, but if there is a procedural question, you can raise that, and I'm happy to answer any procedural questions.
My
So,
question is,
you want to just identify yourself for the record?
John O'Leary, Washington Street, Walpole. My question is, which edition of the bylaws is applicable for this case?
I'll let when it was filed?
It was in effect at the time of the filing, correct?
Right.
So that would be the October 2019 version of the?
Yeah.
Yeah.
2018.
Yep.
Okay.
This one right here. That's what we're working with, okay? Now, yes, okay, so that's just a procedural question. Good. Okay, Ashley, do you have anything you want to start out with?
Sure. So you have, Amy, first of all, made these binders for everybody.
Yay.
Spent a lot of time, and I hope that they'll be a good resource
That's
to
our
you.
girl. Oh my God,
They're
beautiful.
super neat and tidy, but what you have at the front there is a draft of the waivers. This waivers list is labeled A through, I think it goes to like triple E or something. So we'll be going through that tonight, and then in the binder you have all the materials that have been provided to you throughout this process, because that is what is available
Fabulous, Amy.
at this point in the record. So thanks to Amy for spending the time to get that done.
Job.
So these are all the materials that have been submitted through the public hearing process that you can use to help inform your decision. What you also have is a printout of the zoning table. So if you could get that and your site plan ready, this
That's
is
the
gonna-
one you just handed out, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the zoning table that was provided on the plan set as revised September 25th, 2019. And then you have a site plan. So these are gonna be really helpful as we go through the waivers, because I'm gonna refer to a lot of the numbers that are provided here.
Is that the one we have here?
925, okay.
Is this the one that's here?
Yep, that's the site plan.
925 on it.
So what the ZBA is doing is looking at waivers that are necessary to facilitate the construction of this development. So I might suggest we kind of look at them in chunks and then maybe vote on them in pieces. And if there's anything that you need us to look at the record again, or you're not sure of right now, we can come back and kind of finalize that waiver at the next meeting.
Okay,
Does that make sense for everyone?
Does.
Okay.
definitely.
So, I might just start with waiver A. I think it's pretty straightforward. Nothing really to add there. It's clearly necessary, I think. Waiver B,
Can I just ask, sorry
Yeah.
to start with a
Yeah, no.
question on A. In terms of like the balancing the waivers requested and the sort of the extent of the relief that we're granting from the bylaw, I was thinking it might make sense to indicate I agree that we should grant that waiver, but also indicate sort of the extent to which we are deviating from the requirement. In other words, as I roughly calculated, it's about
Yeah.
I have.
2.5 times what would otherwise be allowed, something
You guys
like
got
that.
the right word?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll go through and I have notes on that too. So the waiver should allow 7 buildings with a total of 32 dwelling units on a lot size of 140,836 square feet.
But there's only 6 buildings.
There's 6 now.
Yeah. When they cut it down, they cut a
6,
building
okay.
out, yeah.
So allow 6 buildings. And then what I'll do, sorry, I didn't mention this earlier, but as we go through and kind of identify the ones and to what degree, I'll make notes on those and I'll cross out the ones that the board determines are not necessary. I'll redo the waiver list, and then you can look at that final list at the next meeting. And it'll be, much cleaner, and yes, it'll have what the requirement is, what is requested, and to what degree you're granting.
It's good to have both ends, yeah, good.
Thanks.
Okay, so then B, I just wanted to point out that there's one area that it looks like the 10-foot buffer is necessary where buildings 1, 2, and 3 are. I guess just 1 and 2. So clearly a waiver is needed to facilitate that from the 50-foot buffer, but you might want to be specific about where that buffer is.
Oh, and list the buildings in particular, the
So,
address in particular?
We could specifically call out that the waiver is, 12 feet or 10 feet at that kind of northwesterly portion. Waivers C through G, I think are all appropriate waivers. I think that the conditions need to be appropriate. So when we get to that phase, for example, waivers D, E, and F, I think it would be appropriate to have some sort of surety in place that if they go and they start digging and something goes wrong with the project, that we have something in place to revegetate and to kind of put the parcel back. So I don't know if you want to.
So that would be like a revegetation bond?
Yeah, something like that. And those details will work out in the actual conditions.
Just in making notes on these, I was not inclined to grant the 5D2 waiver to allow them to start clearing as soon as the comprehensive permit is issued and the appeal periods expire. I don't think it's necessary to facilitate, they're not gonna be able to build that out there for a while, and to the extent that something comes up and the project goes south, I would just hate to have a completely cleared site, and I understand the surety issue, but anyway, that was just my thoughts on that.
He's talking D, right?
Yeah.
5D2.
I think waiver C, oh yeah, D.
Okay.
D.
I think we should walk through these,
Yeah.
Okay. So
each one.
Yeah, I think that doing it maybe in chunks, so I think under section 5 use regulations, A through G, I think that's a good chunk to kind
Okay, so
of
let's-
tackle this at.
Right, so the first waiver, you sort of breezed over and said, well, yeah, obviously that needs to be granted. Well, let's take a look and say, yes, it does need to be granted, and if there's any discussion, we should have it now, and otherwise we can put that, as, granted, we can note that, yes, that one would be granted. And just move right down the list. Okay.
Great.
Is that what,
Yeah,
okay.
would we also be discussing, to the extent we're granting a waiver, we want to discuss conditions to the grant of that waiver?
Absolutely.
I
So,
think-
okay.
yeah,
So
and
we
then
do that
we'll-
all at the same time.
we'll get all that kind of in. We might want to, so I think, point out a general idea of, okay, we want some sort of condition that covers these concerns.
Right.
And then when we get the draft decision, we can really go into the weeds of what that looks like versus trying to come up with all the language here.
Yeah, okay.
So, on the first one, the request is to have more than 3 families three-family dwellings on the lot area. So the proposal is to allow six buildings
Right.
with up to 6 families per unit. And I guess one of the questions is that necessary for this project? Is that necessary for this project to go forward? Look at the density in the area. Most of the houses are sitting on, quarter-acre lots or so. And, how does this fit in the character of the neighborhood?
I think what we're looking at, and correct me if I'm wrong, the standard is whether or not the waiver is necessary to facilitate the construction of this project. Questions of design should have happened during the review process. Is that accurate?
We're allowed to have it.
Yeah, I mean, you've covered a lot during the public hearing, but, so, I mean, the general tenet is you can't reduce density for the sake of reducing density. But if, from some site plan perspective, or something that came out of the public hearing, you find some legitimate need to alter the plan in terms of where he's constructing what, then that may or may not end up with a reduction in density. But you have to have some compelling reason if you're gonna eliminate a building or, anything like that, or if you're gonna make changes to his site plan that, even though you're not requiring the elimination of a building, if you put conditions on the site plan that require him to redesign it so that he loses a building, for example, you're gonna have some compelling factual basis for that of what came out of the public hearing.
Okay.
And then I think limited to certain topics, right, like
Right.
health, safety, environmental protection,
Yeah.
not. So for example, like the special permit type of criteria, where is this consistent with the neighborhood? That's not really a basis, as I understand it, for denying a waiver or imposing a condition. It has to be one of these other categories.
And you can't, one thing that didn't come out of the public hearing is discussion about economics, but it's not proper for you to put that type of question to the developer of, show me the economics of why you need this particular project. That's not the way the analysis should go. You need to look at this from a site plan review perspective, and then when you come up with proposed conditions, if there's something either individually or in the aggregate that the applicant thought renders this project economic, then you get into that. But you're not at this point, you can't take the project and challenge it based on, well, prove to me why you need 6 buildings based on project economics. You have to look at it more from a site plan review perspective.
So number A, appears to me, we just change it to 6.
In 32 units.
And it comes out slightly more than 4,000 square feet a unit. You do the math, it's like 4,100 square feet.
Okay.
And we should probably be technical on that, right? And write 41?
We can't be.
Yeah.
I mean, they're, yeah.
Yeah, your decision would be allowed
Up to, yeah.
for,
Okay.
Yeah.
to allow, waiver granted to allow for X, Y, Z.
So on B, my notes say that a buffer zone doesn't look applicable at the southern portion of the portion that's abutting the town of Walpole property. It looks like,
Well, the thing is, there's a difference between a buffer zone and a setback line.
Right.
They've kind of combined them. So
Yeah.
a buffer zone is a planted strip or a not disturbed strip. And so they're calling for 10-foot all around, but like on building 2, we could increase that without still leaving him some backyard area. So now building 1, 10 foot's probably appropriate. But from building 2, we could, again, this is not a lawn, this is plantings. So we could expand it, I think, there.
So you're saying bring it down to building one only?
Yeah, say
waiver?
10-foot buffer behind building one, maybe 20-foot behind building two. The rest I don't think are an issue, because there's
The
no
setbacks.
houses within the 50-foot, so,
The setbacks were an issue for me.
yeah.
But we'll get to that.
We'll get to
Yeah,
that.
we'll get to that.
But he does have it different, okay.
So then building 7, it also might be appropriate.
Well, there's, yeah, yes, right.
So we can go through and individually list each of
Yeah,
the buildings.
yeah,
and
you
what
know, you leave
is
them 10
appropriate.
or 15 feet of grass, and the rest is a buffer zone.
Get the plan on it. I can hardly read it, does anyone else?
What, I know it's.
I can hardly read some of it.
You need better glasses.
Yeah.
Well, I got my
10,
Christmas
so
ones
10
on, so
feet
you're right.
behind 1, and I think 2, to leave a
See
little
the
bit of
little folder?
backyard room.
Big good. No problem.
And then building 7, but buildings,
Be fine now.
these 3 have a little bit more of a buffer.
Yeah.
So then, wait, so that's A and that's B.
We should think about whether we want to plant something in particular in the buffer zone, like, when we get to the discussion of how tall these buildings are. The proximity to single family homes, whether they need to be, of a substantial.
You can't write anything down.
The definition is an area that provides landscape screen and or fencing. So that's, it says landscape
14.
screen, that's the definition of a buffer zone.
Yes, it's a vegetative screen, yeah.
Wait a minute, is building one.
So then waivers
So we're
D.
talking about this right here, Rick, right? The 14?
Well, we're talking, yeah, right. Under a normal site plan, they would require a 50-foot buffer where
Right.
there's a single-family house. Well, obviously, you can't put 50 there, so.
Why can't we put 14 as shown on the plan?
Well, you can't, you don't want him to have to plant trees right up to the foundation wall. I mean, these are condos.
Right, so how about along the property line, plant screening trees such as, 8-foot arborvitae in a row, 12 feet on center.
Sure. You could do that.
Along the property line.
Yeah, we could do that.
But can we tell him
That would be a
what to
condition.
plant?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah.
You can
Okay,
specifically
definitely.
plant.
Okay.
I mean, that's
You-
a common.
Usually, if you're trying to reduce the buffer zone, yeah, you plant it heavily, so, yeah, that's
What is the,
appropriate.
what is the vegetation you just named?
Arborvitae.
Arborvitae. Can you spell that?
ARVORVIETE.
Well, you would know, yeah.
I think it's
Better know, being
It's
A.
A.
works.
A?
Yeah.
A, yeah.
But, so, this is for condition B,
Be,
so.
you could
Buildings
say
one
behind
and
buildings 1,
One,
2, and 7.
Correct.
I thought you said 3.
No, 1, 2, and then 7,
Oh, all right.
because there's a house there.
And those are to be planted by the applicant and maintained in perpetuity by the homeowners association. You get that 8-foot trees, 12-foot on center.
So then C, I would just recommend you change it to 6 principal buildings.
Yeah,
I think it's essentially the same as A.
Yeah.
I mean, I know this criteria is slightly different, but it's the same.
See, we're just changing the building again?
yeah, the number.
And actually going back to B, let's be specific on this, because if we just say behind those units, it needs-
Say-
Yeah, you need to say on the property line.
Along the property line.
starting at the, um,
You don't want to block sight, so.
No.
Oh, so, starting,
Right where the 14 is.
How about at the southwest corner of Building 1? Start
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
okay, southwest corner of Building 1 to the, to the end of the lot. If you look at the plan, it's pretty clear what we're talking about right now, but
Yeah.
I want to make sure it's clear to the applicant. And then on the other one, from the, again, the, I guess this would be the southeast corner of Building 7 on the
Yeah.
property, on the property line.
He shows it on there. Yep.
Yeah, right up to,
So
Right
I
up to
think in
the,
that area, we may be in the area subject to the order of conditions that, if I'm not mistaken. So
from
it says,
Concom.
yeah, the 200-foot riparian area.
So
And
speak
there's
up a little
another-
louder, Bob, so we can hear.
What's that?
Yeah,
Sorry.
could you speak up a little
Um,
louder so we could hear you down here?
I'm just, I think that this area to to the sort of east of Building 7
Brook
is
Street.
within
Yeah.
the, as you get closer to the property lines, is within the wetlands areas
Yeah.
that are
Becomes wetlands.
regulated under their order of
Yeah,
conditions
it's
for
in the
which they have a
riverfront area.
planting plan.
Yeah, right.
So, you know,
Sorry.
we may want to stay
I might suggest we have about 5 pages of these to get through, and I think for me, the goal is to walk away understanding what waivers you want to grant, and to get a general idea of what you want to see in the conditions. I think that we understand what you're looking for in terms of screening from this, so maybe we try and kind of get through
Okay.
them all, and then you will certainly have plenty of time to review that final decision in all of the conditions. But I just,
Okay, nope, you're right, we want to move
Sorry.
this along.
Okay.
We don't want to be here till midnight.
Yeah.
Okay, second one, prohibited, activities prohibited, this is D. And Bob, you had some concerns about this one?
Well, I just, yeah, I guess until they have, we're still at a very preliminary stage even after if they receive a comprehensive permit.
Oh, yeah.
Many hurdles to go. They have a pending appeal, you know, of their wetlands approval, so I'm just not comfortable giving them the green light to
No.
clear the land right as soon
I
as we
agree.
get
No,
the
I
permit.
agree, yeah.
So, I guess the question would be when they, either we can just deny that, and say upon issuance of a building permit, or put some other time in there that we think makes
Is that
sense.
the town standard,
so I
issuance
talked,
of a building permit?
I talked to the building department about this to kind of get an idea for this. The
Yeah.
community I was in previously, when folks wanted to get going on a construction project, we would take some sort of bond or security with a landscaping plan, so that if, you know, for some reason the project didn't go as planned, we could revegetate it. And I think kind of in talking to folks, if there was like a 100-year-old tree there that we were concerned about, or an old building that was really of value that folks were concerned about getting taken down, I would be more reticent to say, okay, let's let them move forward before any, you know, after. But I think a faster project is better for folks if they can get going and kind of get moving on it in terms of not extending out the construction time. I'm also unsure of what, I think once Mass Housing issues their final approval, we can't stop them from moving forward. Is that right? Or what kind of?
Well, it depends on what your permit is and if it's under appeal. I mean, I think you're, on a fairly small site, I think you're fairly protected by you can't do anything until the appeal periods are expired. So even if there's an abutters appeal,
He told us he was gonna use his demo permit. at
well,
last
that's different
hearing.
than, that's different
Yeah,
than
that's the
this.
building, that's a little different.
That's different than this. I mean, we could always
He's gonna do
specify.
some of this to get to it, though.
So they are in fact allowed to move forward, even if there is an appeal filed. They're allowed to move forward at risk, although realistically it never happens. Because before they're allowed to move forward with any activity on the site, they're required to get their final approval from the subsidizing agency. Part of the process of getting that final approval from the subsidizing agency is that you have to get a loan commitment. And for the most part, banks are unwilling to issue a loan commitment while there's an appeal pending. So it's unlikely that they would move forward if there's an appeal that's pending. However, it's not theoretically impossible. However, you certainly can put in a condition that states that there'll be no site clearing until final plans have been received and approved by this board, and before that there's a pre-construction meeting with whatever town departments
Yeah.
would normally hold that sort of meeting.
That sounds good.
And that will
Yeah.
give you, the sense of when they're actually ready to proceed, and give you some input into that process before they actually break ground.
Yeah, that's a good
That
idea.
sounds
So
good.
moved.
You also use the term final approval from subsidizing agency. Would that be good enough to protect the town and the neighbors at that point?
Well, usually, when I represent clients, the final approval from the subsidizing agency comes before the submittal of final plans to the board for their review. So remember, when you issue a comprehensive permit, you're issuing it based upon a set of preliminary plans that do not have all of the detailed components that you would normally see in construction plans. These are necessarily less detailed than will be what's submitted to this town prior to them constructing. So you want to have those plans in your hands. And those plans are going to have to incorporate any conditions that you impose as part of this decision. So you want to see all of that before they're allowed to commence construction of any type
Yeah.
on the site. And more likely than not, that happens after final approval.
It looks like he's offering, though, to toll anything pending any appeal deadline.
I think that it sounds like they also want, because he's gonna have to come back and show the final architecturals.
Yeah.
So is that what you wanna base this going forward, based on the final review that this board will have to confirm that what was,
What was
Yeah.
permitted and conditioned
Final
is
plan.
actually
You should get a set of final
Final
design
plans,
plans
yeah.
that'll
Not
include
architectural.
civil engineering plans, that'll include architectural plans, that
Okay.
will include landscaping plans that address the types of conditions that you're discussing imposing tonight.
Yeah.
All of which you'll have the ability to review for consistency with this decision. It's not another approval process, it's really an administrative review. However, there is some depth to it. They're gonna have to submit very detailed plans, and you're gonna have to go through, or, usually it's staff that will review, and it just to ensure that they actually comply with what's been required of them.
Yep.
Yeah,
Those
could-
plans have to be stamped, or
Yeah.
can they
Yes.
submit?
By real people.
No, they're final plan.
Yeah,
and,
these are final design plans.
Yeah, like I said, like it.
and it, not only is staff, but given that
Final
we've
today.
not really gotten a good
Yeah.
set of
Yeah.
all of these drawings, it's
I know what you
important, I
mean.
think, that it be done in a public setting, with how little information we've been given through
That's certainly fine.
this process,
It-
that's.
But that setting would not be, it would be similar to what you're doing tonight.
Right.
And that it's a public meeting, but it's not a public hearing. It doesn't
Right.
require
There'll be
notice.
no input from
Yeah.
the public.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that there are really any rules on that when you're talking about review of final plans. I would discourage it, because I'm not really sure what input the public would really be able to give you.
No, we're just trying to confirm that what they're giving us conforms to the,
Correct. You want to make sure that the
Permit.
final plans actually have all of the details that are necessary to commence construction, and that they're consistent with what they originally showed, because it's not at all unheard of for a final design plan set to come in and have some actual significant changes to what was approved by the board. Once they actually get into the process of preparing those final plans, sometimes details change, things shift, and if they're significant enough, that may initiate a process where you have to make a determination as to whether it's a substantial or an insubstantial change. But that's all things that you should be reviewing as part of that final plan set.
okay.
So then G, I would just recommend that we include, that's the temporary building or structure. The way the building department normally handles this, I guess, is that it's subject to renewal of building permit every 180 days with a maximum of 5 renewals. So if you grant this waiver, that's a recommendation.
I missed E and F.
E and F, I think those three I kind of
Those are all kind of
tied
part of the
together.
same.
Lumped it, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right. Can't remember Paul's line now.
So on E, is that a waiver of a site plan review requirement that they're requesting, activities approved as part of any site plan review
Yeah,
application.
this is not a site plan.
Well, that was gonna be my point. So
Yeah.
generally what I do with boards, when there is a waiver request that's really for a procedural matter rather than a substantive matter, I actually advise boards to deny the request and note that it is a procedural waiver that is automatically granted as part of a comprehensive permit application. Because again, a comprehensive permit is a single master permit that subsumes all other local approvals. So you don't have to grant a specific waiver of special permit requirements, site plan approval requirements, and other procedural waivers. So rather than actually grant those as waivers, I think it's better to simply note that they are automatically subsumed in the application.
So would we note this was requested and the zoning board says, no, it's not necessary?
It's denied as unnecessary because it's subsumed in the comprehensive permit process.
Does that apply to F also?
Well, F looks more like a substantive provision.
Yeah.
Well, it's, you're not supposed to be able to dig on a lot without either a permit or a special permit.
Yeah. If you're moving 1 foot of earth,
Yeah,
it requires a special permit.
so,
Yeah, I would say that is probably more of a substantive, I mean, a procedural requirement than a substantive requirement. If the requirement is simply to get that permit, then that's a procedural requirement.
yeah.
And as you go about drafting the grant of that waiver, I think their language is kind of loose and as required for the development, as though they can do whatever they sort of feel like they need to do. So just as, sort of, it should be as conditioned in the comprehensive permit or other applicable approvals, or something like to that effect, so they have to observe their obligations under the wetlands approvals and et cetera. And just on G, do we need to specify whether they locate that temporary, I guess they hadn't requested a waiver to put it in a place that wouldn't be, in other words, within a setback or anything like that?
Can we request to be locked and all that kind of stuff?
That
So
the,
kids don't go running around in it?
Secured?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that?
So have they provided you any information as to where
No.
that temporary building?
And I
No.
asked specifically where the location is, and I was denied an answer.
He said he didn't know.
Said he didn't know.
My guess is they'd put it where those 4 parking spaces are in front. Well, we could specify that would be the general area, I suppose.
But we don't want it on Burns Ave.
No. It's on the property, but,
Yeah.
So my recommendation would be that, again, this is a procedural waiver. What they're really asking for is a waiver of the special permit requirement, which the comprehensive permit subsumes. However, they've provided no information regarding the location, so this comprehensive permit does not approve the location of a temporary office trailer, and they will be required to provide that information as part of the final plan set.
okay.
So I totally understand what you just said. What happens when they come back and they say that they're gonna drop it right on the edge of Burns Ave? That's what they've proposed. Can we then turn around and say, no, that's not acceptable?
Because they didn't provide a location as part of their original plans, I would say that yes, you can.
And they were asked.
But
But they would have
it's
to
then,
comply
it's
with.
enforcing it. That's,
Yeah.
that's my concern.
I think you're better to put a condition into the subject of, yeah,
Signage.
what, site, requirements during construction or, prior to,
Yeah.
there are sections of the comprehensive permit decision where you'll have conditions that are applicable to certain phases of the project. So you probably want to have that in there.
Okay, so we don't grant the variance, the waiver, and we put it in.
How do we put in verbiage to keep it secure from the kids in the neighborhood
Right.
jumping in it?
Yeah, let me just,
That would have been me.
put in, yeah, you wanna focus on the waivers tonight, but anything like that, I'll keep a note of it separately to make sure that we include these conditions where appropriate in the
Gotcha.
comprehensive permit decision.
Thank you.
We just could require them to cite it in conformance with the bylaw. I mean, all they've asked for is to keep it on there for 36 months as opposed to 180 days. So that they still have to cite it consistent with the setbacks and everything else that's required under the bylaw,
Okay,
so.
yeah, that
Yeah.
accomplishes exactly what we
Yeah.
want.
Okay.
Right.
And they've requested no waiver of those requirements with
Right.
regard to the structure, so
So
none are
they've
granted.
just requested for more than 180 days. So grant that, but then, comma, the construction, temporary building and structure will comply with
Yeah.
existing zoning for temporary buildings. Okay.
I don't know if you wanna take a step back and look at A through G and maybe see how everyone feels about those, and then we can move on to the next ones.
I think we beat these pretty good.
I think we got them.
Good?
Yep.
Okay. So then we get into the dimensional regulations, which, so just to give you an idea of where we're going, if you turn to the other side, sorry, it's not in color, but I basically took the table of dimensional regulations and fanned them out into each individual one. And this is where the zoning table is gonna be helpful. So just on H, I think the site plan shows a 25-foot setback for the front yard, so I think that's an appropriate waiver to grant. And then for I don't think he actually needs a waiver for this because it looks like they have 72 feet as the rear yard setback. So I don't think that's a waiver you need to grant.
Yeah, I think you're right. Side is 10, so, yeah. Yeah.
For J,
Wait, I'm
Sorry.
still on H.
okay, H and I just
Yeah.
mentioned.
I mean, H,
Why do we have building one only?
well, that's, he wants to put it closer to the street. I don't really see why he needs to.
No.
I mean, 5 feet is not going to screw up anything here.
And my concern on this is that we already heard that this will be coming back in a modified plan after they do the final plans. And if we grant a waiver for that, is that going to pop out someplace else where we've granted an overall waiver for this? So.
Yeah, you would specify if you're going to, but.
Yeah, I just
But-
don't think it's necessary.
But it would also be as shown on the plans. So if you've got one structure that it has a setback of 25 feet, that doesn't mean that they can now revise the plans to make that the setback for all of the structures, because those are substantial changes from what the plans are that the board would have approved.
Well, it depends, also what you want to grant. So you could granted for building one as depicted on the plan, otherwise denied. If you want to grant it for that,
But I guess
or not, or.
as we look at the plan, is that really necessary? Or could he move the building slightly so that it's not necessary? Because the only one we're really talking about here is building one. And as you look at the plan, it seems like there's room at the end of building 6, building 2. We've talked about this, that how these can be moved around.
Yeah.
Why not just,
I don't see why we need to
it's
grant.
not, yeah. I don't think it's necessary, and I think he has room to move it. And my concern is, as I've already stated, if it's granted, then that could pop out someplace else where, well, I'm allowed to be less than 25 feet.
No, you would specify, but it won't pop, if you limit it to building one as depicted on this particular plan, it can't pop up elsewhere, because you're gonna say otherwise denied. But it sounds like you don't wanna grant it to building one at this stage.
I don't see that it's necessary.
No, I'm,
Mr. Chairman, my concern here would be that if there is some reason why, in fact, it is necessary, that you are unaware of that. Have you done any sort of investigation into whether or not this can actually be placed in a location where it would comply? Because what you don't want to do is wind up in a situation where, you know, you go through and issue a decision that you believe is actually appropriate, and all of your conditions are conditions, you know, that you believe are consistent with local needs, and you've got one condition that ultimately would render the project uneconomic, for a 5-yard setback that, you know, you weren't necessarily clear as to what the impact was. So I think that you need to know whether or not it is actually movable without eliminating that building essentially.
We've mentioned it
Yeah.
in the public hearing process.
Mhm.
I don't know that we ever got a response.
We don't usually get response.
I also don't think we have anything from like fire or anyone talking about site distance issues or anything that we can point to say this poses a safety threat.
No, you're right. I mean, it's not a big deal, it's just
Well,
But
irritating.
if you're comfortable that it is movable, and that you don't think that some issue is going to crop up that would make that a structure that couldn't be built on these plans, then that's one thing. If you're unsure, I want to make sure you understand the
Yes.
risk.
No, yeah.
definitely understand the implications of saying, at this point, no, we don't see that you need the waiver, and they say that, well, that's where a water main was gonna go or something like that.
And you can rest assured that if the applicant does take an appeal, that whatever position they take during that process is going to be one in which it makes it impossible to construct this building. If there's any way that they can, you know, make that argument, they will. Because again, the more you make the decision look uneconomic, the better their odds are of winning an appeal.
And can the applicant come back and ask for an amendment to the waivers and say, you know, we really do want that 25?
So that's the dirty little secret for boards of appeals. When you hear a comprehensive permit application, they can always come back, and frequently do, again and again. I've been involved in projects, you know, where it's been a decade, where they haven't even commenced construction, and they've had the plans modified multiple times.
So if this board says we don't want to grant the waiver for the 25-foot setback, they could come back with plans that show and explain why they can't do that or request it again?
So even if they didn't appeal
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
board's decision, and we're going to move forward, and then at some point said, we've taken a second look at this, and it actually doesn't work, they could request a modification to put the building back where they originally proposed and request that waiver
Yeah.
again, and that would ultimately, whether or not the board had to grant that waiver would be based upon whether or not it renders the project uneconomic.
Yeah, if they have a good reason, you know, we'd be fine with it, they just have not.
GHCD encourages in their handbook the procedure that you just suggested, is that you put some language in about it, that it's subject to them coming back for a minor modification.
We could say, it appears that denying the waiver will not impact the project.
Right.
Okay.
And then
And
if
then
they,
the ZBA
they can
will
come back
entertain
and say, oh, no, it will, and fine, you know?
We can say that, I mean, it's right out of the handbook, we can indicate, the ZBA will entertain a request for a minor modification if additional waivers
Sure.
are needed, you know,
Yeah.
based on the
Yeah.
final plan, so. We could put that, we can add that type of language in to make it clear to him that if that's the deal breaker, the 25 feet on building
The,
one.
And that's my only concern is, you go through an entire decision, you try your best to be reasonable and impose a decision that addresses all of the needs, and then there's this one little thing that they're able to use, you know, and sort of twist it around and use it to support an appeal.
The way the 40Bs are designed is, if you have a site plan, you know, as a design engineer, you try to meet all the regulations. And you may not be able to meet one, so you ask for a waiver. With a 40B, you usually don't pay any attention to the regulations, so you just lay it out, and it turns out you need a variance. Oh, okay, well, ask for it.
Right. You work your way backwards.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
You set up
It's a
the layout
different
first,
process.
and then you figure out what waivers are necessary.
Yeah, it's a different process.
Does something like that mess with our timeline?
No.
Because we'll have the decision issued.
Okay.
Okay, then I, is everyone comfortable rejecting I?
I thought we were on H.
We said, yeah, we're gonna reject
thought-
H. We didn't reject H, now we're going to I,
Okay.
okay? And this is allow rear yard setback of 20 feet.
Yeah, I don't think they need that.
They
No,
have
but I-
73 feet on the
Yeah,
rear yard
they're,
setback.
they're,
Just building one.
they're confusing the rear of a building with the rear setback, which are two different things.
So then now I've flipped over the other page, if everyone's okay with that, to J.
Okay, okay, yeah, I'm on J,
Did we deny I?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting that they're, even in the table, it's 40.2.
Right.
So,
So J is asking to be, to allow exterior decks or steps to be within 5
Absolutely
feet,
not.
and I think the board was strongly
Definitely strong
against
on that.
this. And we asked the applicant why this was necessary, and he said it was an amenity
It was
that he
nice.
wanted to
Yeah.
provide.
His word, it was be nice. Remember?
So, yeah, that would be my concern, especially with those abutters to the rear of
Yeah.
that property, and the
Sure.
impact of a second-story deck 5 feet from the property line. So I'd recommend denying
right,
that.
it's also, I think, inconsistent with the request that they have a buffer zone down to 10 feet.
Yeah.
And you can't have a 10-foot buffer zone if you're allowing structures within 5 feet of that.
Yeah.
So I think, can we just say this waiver request is inconsistent with another waiver they requested? And
Yeah.
therefore it's denied.
Yeah, I could do that, yeah.
And I don't think it's appropriate.
Right, on top of that.
I'm not sure you need to do more than simply state that it's denied.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
In this instance, when we're talking about decks, it's a
It's a
minor amenity.
amenity.
I'm not sure that there's really a significant economic component to
Yeah.
denying the deck.
No, right.
So
Never,
I don't
never in
see
the
a lot
history of the world has anybody actually used one of these decks.
No, second-story deck, never.
And then he wanted them to grill on it. Remember the fire chief?
So that,
So then the next is another kind of blanket waiver that was requested that I've kind of fanned out into each individual component. If it's okay, I'll just run through these quickly because I think most of them don't actually apply to this project.
Okay.
So, starting with L, the zoning table states that
hold on, you
140,000.
skipped K.
Okay.
Oh, K is the blanket waiver.
Okay,
So there's no specific requirement right now in K as K sits, so
Oh, that's
just
the
skipping
blanket.
over
Okay.
K.
okay,
You're denying
You're
blanket
denying
waivers.
blanket waivers.
Right,
okay.
so we're denying that. And then getting to L, it says that 140,000 square feet is required, and I'm referring to the zoning table that I handed out.
Yeah, I think the, one of the issue is that people are looking
I don't know.
Oh,
spend lots on.
there's a new waivers list in your binder. That's the one I'm working off of.
The one she gave us tonight.
So, and it says 140,836 is proposed, so it looks like they meet the required area. So moving on to N, the zoning table states 100 feet is required and 100 feet's proposed, so I'd recommend denying that.
Okay, we just jumped over,
Wait a minute,
we
yeah.
just jumped over L, M,
L, M, and N.
So if everyone could go to the version in the binder that says draft for the waivers list, then we'll all be on the same page.
I think that's the one.
In the bind, in the white one.
Okay, white
I was using the
binder,
latest one
draft.
you
I have it right here, but,
Oh, I got mine right here. I printed mine out.
but we're still skipping them all.
So the most up-to-date one is that one in the binder.
Okay.
Okay.
It says draft on it. Yep, that one. So K, we're recommending denial because it's a blanket waiver. L, it looks like they conform, so we're recommending denial. M, it looks like they conform, so we're recommending denial. N, the table states that 30% is required for maximum lot coverage, and they're saying they're only doing 15.8%, so again, recommend deny. Moving on to O, the zoning table states that 50%, and they're proposing 34.5%, so again, recommend deny. minimum usable open space, this one wasn't actually listed in the zoning table. They would be required to have 56,334 square feet. So I'd recommend, if you found that their minimal usable space was appropriate, to just approve as shown on plans. I don't have a calculation for that.
I'm still on L.
Okay,
I had to get out the old one that you wanted. I don't know where L is on here. Hold on.
so, are you there now?
Double D, I, okay, there's L. Sorry, I was using one I printed out.
Everything's no down,
They,
down.
they comply with all those, so you don't have to
Yeah,
really
so we
worry.
don't need waivers, yeah.
So L through
Oh,
T, O.
where they
Now we're on
comply.
P, we're on P.
So P, I'd recommend, since we don't have a calculation, my hunch is that they actually comply with it, so I'm not sure if we should just say a waiver if necessary, or require the calculations at that final, I'm not really sure how to
This is all the same.
maneuver that.
Yeah. Could we say no, unless they provide us with a reason? Because you, like you said, they have not given us a number, right?
Yeah, I don't have the calculation for their minimum usable open space.
So we could say no unless they provide us with the number.
That you'll entertain a modification.
Yeah.
That's the
Okay.
only way of doing it.
Um,
Yeah.
This is
I
O.
mean, yeah, we can't guess at it, so.
So now we're on to.
So that one is
That's
no
B.
and provide info.
Yeah,
And
Yes.
by the way, the idea of, as the key word on this is, usable open space. People's idea of usable open space varies.
some towns actually define it.
Yes.
very
As far as uplands and
specifically.
stuff in.
I don't think we
do
define it,
not,
no.
We don't.
because when on the planning board, Suzanne and I dealt with something like this
Yeah.
many years ago.
So it sounds like from our earlier discussion, Q is something that you also want to deny. That's a minimum front yard setback, 30 feet's required. They're requesting 25 feet.
Yes,
What we're saying is
same thing.
It's not
yeah.
necessary.
Not necessary unless they provide us information that it is.
R, I would also recommend denying. They can comply. They've shown that they can comply. They've asked for a waiver, but deny.
Yep.
S,
Okay, just
same reason.
Because this is the side yard, let's just be clear, side
Yeah.
yard setback,
Yeah,
they're actually showing that they comply
yes,
in
Yeah.
the plan.
Right, that's,
So it
so
shows,
they do not need a waiver.
I don't need a waiver.
And then T,
Yep.
wait, S, they don't need that either.
No.
That's the rear
That's the
yard.
rear yard,
That's,
no.
they've got 70 feet or more.
So deny 5 as well. I mean, yes.
Yes.
That's it. Done for the-
so then T is the building height waiver, also recommending that you do not grant that waiver.
Yeah, it says that they're proposing 35 feet, so.
The plan they gave us meets the regulations, or appears to, yeah.
So then moving on to U, the number of buildings on the lot. So they're requesting to allow 7. You'd probably want to change that to allow 6.
6, yeah.
Sorry.
And we're asking for 35, they said they were at 35.
So not applicable, right?
Right.
Did you want to discuss U any further?
You have to clarify that that's 32 units as opposed to 6 dwellings per building.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, maximum, yeah, maximum of.
Deny.
Condition,
And then the next one, V, says minimum 30-foot setback from any building to any adjacent property line. I think they show that they can do more than that and less than that, so I think that's, based on this site plan, necessary, if you're approving this site plan.
so It's possible that the only place they need that is for building 1.
And building 7.
That's at
27
27
feet.
feet?
Building 1, I think, is at 14.
Yeah.
Mine's really little. So you can allow 14 feet.
Yeah, we could hold them, yeah. This is a site plan, yeah.
But
Specific to just building 1, so he can't push everything?
Yeah.
This is 6C.
Oh.
Let's see, back, yeah, back here, they have,
But yeah, I
it's
don't,
less than 30,
You just went
that reference.
27, I think.
that's what if you
It's up here
Okay.
later.
Okay.
rewrite his.
So that's why he wants to do this one.
Saying you can minor condition.
No.
Condition isn't saying building
And
one.
this one here.
In V, I have to check on the reference. There might be a different,
I think when you put building 1 and building 7,
Granting
is that what it
a waiver.
was?
yeah.
Allow
Change
14
what he
feet.
asked for.
Okay.
Building 2, you can't tell.
No, there's no setback on,
They just didn't
I mean,
bother.
so-
Or building 6, it doesn't.
One way to address it would just, since we've already addressed setbacks on other waiver requests, we could just say denied C waiver, blah, 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 for setback and, requirements.
that's true. That's
Rather
true.
than try to repeat.
Nitpick each one.
Redo
Or
it.
just, we might end up writing conditions that are inconsistent with each other. It'd be better just to refer them to.
Right,
the
refer it
setback.
back to the original waiver that we granted on the previous page.
Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
we could, yep, so we could make sure that whatever waivers are absolutely necessary, with the exception of the front setback, because you've made clear that you don't want to grant a waiver because you don't feel that's necessary. So moving on to X, if that's okay.
So what are we doing with V?
V, we're gonna refer to the other waivers that you've granted.
B. Letter B.
That was W.
V
Same. B
and
The
W.
original.
Oh, okay.
I'll
Well,
let it be, yeah.
so, sorry, W is a little bit different, because that's about the buildings,
Yep.
being
W was
apart.
between two buildings.
So,
That's different.
the plans are showing 12 feet, and he's requesting 10
yeah.
feet, so I don't know if you wanna be specific as to the 10 or 12.
There's only one that's shown. It looks like it's maybe the closest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's 12.
Well.
So he's asking for 10. So if you wanna,
Is there a fire department,
State code, I believe, is 10 feet,
10 feet?
I believe, unless somebody knows different.
I think if he's asking for 12 as shown on the plans, we give him. Yes.
12?
so he's asking for 10, but he's showing 12.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
granted for 12 is shown on the plan.
Give him 12. It's his plan.
And then X, allow for 32 dwelling units, modify that.
Hold on.
So is everyone okay with H through X?
What's X?
Don't we change X to
Where are we at
32?
We did.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
We just did, okay.
If you want to redo the math, you can change that 39 number to whatever it comes out.
It's like
Right.
4,000 something,
It's a little over
4,100.
4,000, yeah.
That's, okay.
So Y has to do with the sign regulations. Our current bylaw allows you to have, I think, 32 square feet for temporary construction signs. So I would actually recommend granting this waiver, because we're treating the speaker differently, which might cause some issues.
I don't have a problem.
The speaker would,
Yeah, so since the bylaw allows for a temporary construction sign, but treats real estate differently, and the attorney sitting to my right could probably explain this a lot better than I can, but you're not allowed to treat different speakers differently.
okay.
Basically, all sign regulations in the country are unconstitutional.
Yeah, to sum it up.
Working their way through them one at a time.
Yeah, in reality, 30 square feet is smaller than a sheet of plywood.
Yeah, it's
So-
about me
Yeah.
high and a little bit more than me across.
It's a sheet of
It's smaller than a
plywood.
sheet of plywood. Okay. So we would grant that.
Yeah, we
Okay.
can. Show that we're nice guys.
Do we condition on location or anything like that? No?
No, I
We condition it on Ashley's dimensions.
Yeah.
Ashley High.
And 1.2 Ashley's in width.
I think there is some verbiage about where those signs can be located in
There
the
is.
bylaw.
Yeah.
We've not asked for any other waivers relative to the signage,
Okay.
so,
So the only waiver they would get would be to the square footage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay. So Z,
And can I just see, it says, property currently for sale, rent, or lease. These are all for sale units, as it's been
Yeah.
shown to the town.
That's a good point. Yeah,
So should we
Take
take
that right
out,
off. Good point,
take
John.
out, rent or lease?
right.
I think he just borrowed the language that's
I-
written in the
Yeah.
code,
But
so.
we don't-
Clean it up for him.
Okay.
So in that should stay the same, because that's just restating the language of the regulation, but then in the grant of the waiver, it should state, permits a for sale sign of.
Specifically, yeah. Okay.
Okay. So then moving on to Z, this one might be one of the procedural ones that you mentioned earlier. It says applicability.
Yeah, this is not a common drive.
No, I think that this is what we're it is a common private driveway.
Well, it's a site plan driveway as opposed to a common drive. Common drive is a deal for 2 or 3 houses specifically.
Yeah, but it's not a subdivision driveway.
It's not a subdivision driveway.
Yeah.
But like if you're building this is a conventional rental property, you're not, the common driveway bylaw is not applicable, I don't think. Does that sound right?
Say that again.
If this were being built as a conventional
Right.
rental unit,
Right.
then the common drive bylaw would not be applicable to the driveway for this.
Right. But it is applicable. I don't think that this is procedural. I think you need to grant this waiver for 32 units.
So
Because you
he's,
do have a common driveway for 32 dwelling units. Here, they're for sale.
so if
Yeah.
it's not a common driveway, then waivers double B all the way through double O would
Right.
not be waivers that he needs.
Right. No, that's true.
Well, so this is the section that he's requesting a waiver from, just says a common driveway is a driveway used as common access to no more than 3 lots or dwelling units. So
Yeah.
is he asking for a waiver to have a common driveway for 32 units as opposed to 3?
I think that's
Right.
what he's doing.
think he's asking for.
Right.
Otherwise, we don't have any other standards to apply to this, so it's.
The only problem I have with it is the building requirements for a common drive are different. Now, we've said we wanted this
Yes.
to be built like a street,
Yes,
but the common drive has a whole different set of
Right.
construction standards.
right. But you're gonna impose those conditions on the standards
Right,
on this.
right.
But he still needs the waiver, I think, for the common driveway.
Okay.
Don't you think?
But does that mean he can use the
Because it's
lesser?
it is a driveway.
No,
it's
you still
not
get
a-
to condition it how you
Yeah.
see appropriate, based
Right.
on street regulations.
Not like regular.
You're gonna
common
allow him
driveway.
to use that private way to get to 32 dwelling units,
Yeah.
but then you're gonna specify his
Yeah.
requirements on
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
By allowing for the common drive, you're not waiving those requirements.
No, no, you're right.
Do we state it like that?
I mean, we could say, subject to the conditions that when we have those numbered conditions.
And that would be the width of the common drive and
Right.
the cul-de-sac on the
asphalt.
end?
Yeah, and the
dimensional
asphalt
Asphalt
width and
is
the
different.
gravel and the curbing and all
All
that
that
stuff.
stuff's different in common driveway.
Yeah. Our common drive is an
a driveway.
unusual thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't really apply to anything but a couple of houses that want to
The whole
use
town, yeah.
one drive.
Yeah.
That was my point,
I think you may be better off determining that this is not applicable, that it's a procedural requirement that it is not applicable because they're not requesting approval of a common driveway. So it's not even a permit that's subsumed in this process, they're not asking for it,
They're
and
not.
they're not granting it. Because I think that there is the potential, if you say that it's applicable and you have to grant substantive waivers, that they're gonna be able to make the argument, well, they've told us that the common driveway standards apply, therefore those are really what's being waived and not the street standards.
And
Yeah.
I did look at the individual ones and
Fire department said
they,
it couldn't be a common drive, it wasn't a common
That's
driveway.
what
They
Yeah,
were
I don't have a
pretty clear
problem
about
with
that.
doing it the way Paul said it, it's just denied it as not applicable.
That would be my point, yeah.
And then
And
it's-
then we're not preventing him from building.
No,
if
no, no, not at all.
He has it on the plan,
Right.
that'll be conditioned otherwise.
No.
It's just that these are waivers that are simply unnecessary because you're not proposing a common drive.
Right.
okay, great, that's gonna make
Hold
the
on,
night go
Bob.
much
Go
Well,
ahead.
no, I just, those, maybe it'll
Here's
come up at a, at another, I mean, we did have, I don't know if this is the waiver that we discussed this, but, we did have testimony from the fire chief that said it's too far.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
more than 750 feet.
But that's
that's
street.
separate.
That's not a common drive, yeah.
Okay, well, if we're, is there another place where we're gonna?
Yeah, so that's
pop
gonna be
up?
addressed
Okay.
in the conditions, but if I could point out, in reviewing some of the requirements, I think there's some good things that we should pull out of here and put as conditions.
Yeah, but that one's gonna be a big one for you to discuss, is that, so that isn't in here because it's a subdivision regulation of the length of the roadway. And
But
so,
we can bring that up as a condition for safety reasons.
well,
Let's just,
Paul and I-
Let's
Paul
have
and I
that
were-
conversation.
yeah.
Okay, when we get there, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
But you're not gonna get there under this discussion, so you,
Right.
because it doesn't come up in the waivers, so
Okay.
if you wanna put it as a.
But I think it's all on our minds,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so then just going to waiver double F, or I guess not a waiver, but,
Ashley, because we said Z, no, it's not necessary, what does that do to a number of the other ones after that?
it means that they're not waivers that are needed. But there, I just wanted to point out a couple of things. So, the fire department pointed out that they need the driveway, road, whatever you want to call it, to support an 80,000-pound vehicle.
What number, would?
Double F, just in speaking with, I sent this out for comments, and that's the comment I got back from the fire department, so I just wanted to point that out here.
That's the part of the common driveway versus the site plan.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that we track
So
that as a condition.
even when it is not a subdivision, the board is allowed to do the construction standards for subdivisions as conditions. And I think you're probably gonna be better
That's
off
where we
taking
do-
those construction standards out of the subdivision rules and regulations than you are out of the common driveway
Yeah,
regulations.
and that's not in there, I just, that came up as something,
yeah.
What was it, 80, what?
80,000
pound, yeah. And then another thing in the common driveway is signage required for emergency response systems, so that's all. Oh, and then, how trash and recycling is gonna be handled, so we'll deal with all those things at conditions.
Yeah.
So that brings us all the way to, double P.
Okay, so we just went through, Okay.
GG is where I ended up.
Well, that whole,
That's the
no,
next
the next
page.
page too,
Okay.
next page.
The next
all the way
page,
down to
all the way
G.
down to double N, right?
Correct, yeah.
no,
Double
actually,
N.
double O,
Mine's all out of whack.
all the way down to,
Zoning bylaw, section 11, huh?
Wait a minute, wait.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Where
You
are
put
we
in mine?
now? Double N?
double N.
Double
Down to
P.
double N?
Yeah.
Or double P?
P.
Yeah, we skipped all of those because
Even
it's not a
double
common
O.
driveway.
It's
Okay.
common drive.
Very uncommon.
right there, top right there.
What happened to AJ?
Sure,
It's all common drive
It's all
stuff.
common
All
drive.
common drive.
that's common.
So we
Okay.
just
That's
skip
common
it
drive.
over?
Yeah,
Yeah, because it's not,
They're not
it's not
applicable.
applicable.
Okay.
You're not skipping over the subject matter of the
Road.
roadway
Just the
requirements.
Just the
It's
way.
a different discussion.
Okay.
So for double P, the town engineer feels that the way the utilities are laid out is the best way to have them laid out and requires a waiver. So we would support the request for this waiver.
Okay.
Okay.
Double P.
So this is about earth removal?
Important.
This is an important one,
Yeah.
and we'll need to make sure that appropriate conditions are in place, so where the materials are going after they're removed.
And who's gonna monitor it?
And who's gonna
that's our
monitor it?
That's the
monitoring
biggie.
situation.
Yeah.
So
Where
that'll,
we end up in.
Well, what this does, see, normally you have a plan that's approved, which shows that you're gonna take X cubic yards off the site or whatever. Without a plan approved, that's why this provision is here. So I think since we're approving the project, we can either say yes, it's usually covered under other stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is this where we condition time and all that kind of stuff, like the watering of the dust and all
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so
Do
that'll all
we
be
do that
covered.
right now?
No, we'll
No,
do that in the
those are
condition.
conditions.
We're just doing the waivers.
Yeah.
It's great enthusiasm.
So that's a yes?
Yeah, we'll
Yes.
give them that, sure.
You're so nice.
And then double Q, the same kind of thing. It's really the ideal layout from.
Yeah.
I think we heard from conservation that the materials they're excavating are to be placed under pavement of the roadway, if not removed from the site. So
Yeah.
I would just, if you could kind of cross-check, I would like us to consider that if they're excavating and it's not gonna be under impervious surface, that it be removed from the site.
Okay.
But
That was that was a
That's-
big discussion.
He said he was gonna change the streetlights around.
14 different people.
So double Q, that's approved.
Yeah,
Approve.
yeah, same
Grant
thing,
that.
yeah.
And then we get into double R, and this one might be one of those procedural, it has to do with materials submitted, height and use of all buildings on abutting. I think that's a procedural question, so we would deny that because it's not necessary.
Well, I think what we want is in the final plans, they should be showing this.
The abutting,
Yeah, I mean, that's a standard
But that
thing.
should be addressed through conditions.
Right, that's what I mean, yeah.
You can't apply the site plan review requirements because this is not a site plan review. It's
Right.
a comprehensive permit process. If there are plans that you want to see as part of the final plan set, put it in as a condition.
Yeah, so that would be a condition.
and does the board feel the same about double S?
Yeah. It's the same
Yeah,
thing.
plus
Yeah,
he's proposing it consistent with that as well.
Yeah.
So just condition? Okay.
And then for double T, I would just recommend a condition that the police department review the lighting plan to make sure it meets their safety standards.
It was actually fire. Remember they were having trouble with the streetlights turning the,
Police and fire.
Police and
so
fire.
both, yeah.
Drew, did we see lumens on that
No,
plan?
there was no
All
light.
it was the light.
poles.
2 poles.
That would be something we'd like to see as part of the final plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there a standard that you want applied to that?
Should be
Yeah,
For
before
instance,
the-
is there a local
It's-
requirement that prohibits spillover onto abutting properties?
Not per
Well, usually we
se.
condition it.
It's-
Most of what gets conditioned, even for any plan, it's green sky, no.
Dark
black-
sky?
Dark skies?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would be,
I think
dark-
actually my standard condition.
right, standard conditions, dark skies.
Yeah.
And that's for all lights on the project, not just street lamps.
But I do remember the fire department was.
You don't need,
That's right.
you don't need to have like porch lights or things like that, post lights. Right, it's just the street lights.
It all depends if they put floodlights on the back of buildings and stuff.
Yeah. So
yeah,
they've got two streetlights,
Right, there was one in the
I think
cul-de-sac.
if we say
and then one at the other end. Yeah.
Okay.
compliant.
Okay, yeah.
So I think we should have two sections, one discussing specifically street lighting, and then the other discussing the lighting on the exterior of the buildings.
Okay.
Because they're gonna be different. You want the street lights to spread their light, and you don't necessarily want the house residential lights to be
Right.
spilling over. And then landscape plan,
Huh?
again, conditioned of
Condition,
your
yeah.
final review.
We've asked for it.
Okay, on that, if they come in and show three bushes planted.
So your conditions should be specific as to what it is you're looking for, and I think the draft decision, I generally have a pretty detailed section on what's required for landscaping, simply because it's really typical for applicants to ignore that as part of their plans. So I usually have very detailed requirements as to what's necessary. So we can take a look at those and see if that's
Okay.
sufficient, see if there's anything you want to add to it. But yeah, you want to make sure when you're saying they have to come in with final plans, to say what they need to develop. And that gives you the teeth, so when they come in with a plan that doesn't have sufficient landscaping, for you to say, no, it doesn't comply with that decision, go back to the drawing board.
And you have some wording for that that's
I do.
been used in other
do.
good projects?
We also have a plan dated September 20th, 2019, that's titled Restoration and Planting Details, that,
Is that part of the conservation?
part of the
Commission?
conservation
That's a
commission.
conservation plan, yeah.
It's pretty specific about exactly what's gonna be planted, what species, kind of all of that. So we'll make sure that this also gets put into the
And
conditions.
is that throughout the project, or is that just within the wetland areas?
It doesn't cover the whole project,
Not
it's
only the
really the
wetlands.
25
Around the
buffer
wetlands,
restoration
buffer
area.
zone and
Yeah.
that stuff,
So
yeah.
that north westerly portion isn't included.
Right.
Where the people are.
And then fees, he's asking for a waiver for filing fees, but
Okay.
that's a procedural thing.
It's a procedural waiver, you don't need to grant it because it is procedural, but you can't charge them fees for review of the site plan on the comprehensive permit application.
Right.
You can charge them a fee for their comprehensive permit application, and that, should be included in the costs, when you set your filing fees.
But he's not requesting fee waivers for building inspection or any of that?
Yeah, we're gonna get to
We'll
that.
get to that.
Okay,
So that
But
brings
this
us,
is just simply fees for site plan
Site plan
review.
review.
which is a
Application,
process.
yeah,
You're not-
application.
And we have not, so the
This
answer
isn't a
is,
site plan review, so there's no
Yes.
fees associated.
so we're gonna grant that.
No, you're
No,
gonna
it's
deny it
it's
as
not
unnecessary.
applicable.
It's not, right, no, not
Superfluous.
applicable.
Not that.
Denied, not applicable.
okay, that brings us to AAA.
No,
Wait.
triple-
Oh, we
W.
skipped.
Wait, we got double V.
The wetland.
Wetlands.
Oh, I got too excited, I'm sorry. There's fees listed twice, okay. So, double V, we're saying no.
No, not applicable.
Not applicable.
Okay, so then double W. I have in my notes that I don't see a compelling reason, why the ZBA should not keep the definition that they have, that the town has of, protected resource areas.
Yeah.
Is there any difference?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
What's the difference?
we have a 25-foot
No,
buffer.
But that's not a resource area definition. My
No, they-
understanding is
The buffer zone
from when
is considered.
the conservation agent came before you, she said that the resource areas are essentially treated the same.
Yeah, but they're not, though. Your bylaw treats it as, she did say that, but it's not. It's,
No,
No, it's not.
it's your 100-foot buffer is treated as a resource area.
Yeah.
Like the state act.
Yeah.
So, but what she did say was she had recommendations on it, that according to the agent, the only thing the Conservation Commission was concerned about was the 25-foot, either no disturb or vegetated buffer within the 100 feet. So that's what she wanted, that's what she conveyed to you, that you should be careful about adopting into yours. So, I would deny a blanket waiver. He just wants the 100-foot treated as a
Differently.
non-resource area.
Is a Wetland Protection Act buffer zone,
Exactly.
not a resource area.
Exactly,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't really think we can think about it, about what we'd recommend on whether you deny that or not.
it's a pretty sensitive area, I mean.
I don't think it's
Legit.
that issue, though, because the agent is saying there's not a concern
Not a
about
big
it.
deal.
And I
for
think
her.
So
he's shown, sorry, that he can comply
Yeah.
with the,
Well, and that was the point that I wanted to make, was if it's applicable, you don't necessarily want to waive it. However, what you do want to do is grant a permit that allows particular work to be done pursuant to it. Just because the local bylaw treats a certain area as a resource area and the Wetlands Protection Act does not, doesn't mean that the Conservation Commission won't issue an order of conditions to allow work within that area. So, and that's what you would be doing, acting as the Conservation Commission. So that doesn't mean it's no longer a resource area under your local bylaw. It just means that you're allowed to authorize work within that resource area.
So they've already granted the
Yeah,
permit,
they
right?
did
They've
grant
already
it.
issued the
Under
order.
the Wetlands Protection Act.
Right.
But you've also gotten
Walpole granted.
feedback from your Conservation Commission as to what they would like to see you do with regards to the
Oh,
local
okay.
bylaw,
Yeah,
in
all right.
regards to
And she
the
said that
setbacks.
could work in the resource
So,
and then-
Again, you will issue a decision that does allow work
Mm-hmm.
under the local bylaw, which is what you're supposed to do as the Conservation Commission under Chapter 40B.
So we don't,
So you wouldn't grant that waiver, but ultimately you will grant a permit under the local bylaw to allow work within that resource
so
area.
that's in the condition?
Correct.
Okay, and then double Z deny also, that's the fees again.
Yep.
And now I think we're at AAA?
There you go.
Okay.
Sorry, just on double Y,
Double Y.
we're denying.
What
Double
happened
Y
to
and
X,
double
Y,
X.
and Z? What
They're all
happened
the
to
Double
that?
same,
Y
they're
is
the
denied.
same as
Okay.
we were
Yeah.
talking about
Okay.
with
Denied or, yeah, no, okay. And fees,
So AAA has to do with, applicability. Says this bylaw shall apply to flows entering the municipal storm system. This isn't entering the municipal storm system, right? So a waiver's not necessary?
The site approval letter specifically said that he should comply with local stormwater regulations.
that's interesting.
Yeah, it was
So-
specifically noted, you can look back at it. So I think that the town stormwater regulations are appropriate here.
Yeah, I mean, I had a question on it of what your, I don't think the site engineer peer reviewer commented about that.
And isn't it the opposite, that the town's water is gonna ultimately end up in his catch basins, which then goes there private?
I don't think that's what's actually gonna happen.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's the way that they.
I think it was
originally
discussed that
and-
that
okay.
would be, but I don't think,
But Carl had taken that back. He said that they would not propose any improvements that would result in that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a big difference, I just think that
Well,
we
that was
don't
my-
need to grant a waiver.
That was my question on your local expertise. Are there appreciable differences
No.
between your local stormwater bylaw and the DEP?
The
It doesn't appear
bylaw
that
gets-
they're asking for any substantive waivers.
yeah, there's no
No,
other.
they get to it. They're
Go ahead.
The bylaw gets a
Big
little
requirement.
specific. You know,
Yeah.
it's similar to the DEP, but it
DEP
gets a little more
waiver
specific.
requirements.
But
Significantly better?
I think they comply with
Specific,
it.
yeah.
I think they comply with it, yeah.
So could we do
But that-
the deny with the,
Yeah.
you could come back for a
So
modification?
this says stormwater management plans,
Mm-hmm.
which I presume to mean that they want to provide stormwater management plans and calculations consistent with the DEP standards, rather than whatever your management plan standard is in your bylaw. I still don't see that as a substantive waiver, I see that as a procedural waiver.
Oh.
Unless they call
No,
out
but you're
somehow
not, you
how it's
wouldn't be able to
calculated
require it.
differently.
You wouldn't be able to have any requirements under the bylaw. That's the issue.
Yeah.
So you won't, I think we should deny
I-
it, subject to them coming
I
back
think
for
they've
minor
complied with our bylaw.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
is
So I
don't
don't
see
think-
substantively
I don't think we need a
what
waiver.
relief they're asking for.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
any. And they've not, if it is any, they've not shown that it's necessary.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Okay. Is everyone comfortable there?
Are we doing
Okay.
it deny, go by the Walpole Storm Management?
But no, I had deny already complies with the bylaw.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So then the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5
Hold
all
on,
have
hold
to.
on.
That's
the-
not true, because
No.
they're not, he wouldn't be seeking a waiver of it if he's
That's
saying.
right, there's gotta be something up here.
Well, the lawyer who prepared the waiver list
Yeah.
really had no idea what the regulations were. He
Right.
just sees Walpole, stormwater regulation, no offense to the lawyers,
I don't know.
stormwater regulation, and he asked for a waiver.
Yes.
But
So I think
in
it
the
should be
design
Ashley's
process,
proposal, we deny it subject if
Yeah.
there's some
Right, if
thing
there's
you
any
can come back for a
substantive
minor
provision.
mod.
when Phil is reviewing the plan, he's looking at Walpole's regulations, and GLM is complying with them. So I don't think it's an issue. I think we just deny the waiver and
Yeah.
let it go.
If there's some particular provision, he can come back for.
Right, yeah.
Okay, then CCC again is a procedural
Wait,
thing.
let me BBB.
So then D, the following 5 with the triple D, all the way through HHH. So in terms of sewer and water does not support the waiver request for their fees.
Right.
And building,
So-
surprise.
So, Triple C said, we waive all filing fees, and we're gonna say, no.
Because it's, what's the,
Well,
subsumed?
no, there's a
Just for
specific
stormwater.
fee
These are different.
under the
These aren't-
stormwater
Yeah,
regulation.
these aren't application fees
No,
for a
these are
different
review
approval
fees.
process.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are actual connection fees.
Oh, no, so
No,
I'm sorry,
no, that's-
CCC is a
Look back
review
at
fee.
CC.
So triple C is a review fee,
Yes.
Review fee schedule,
So
yeah, that.
deny that one, and then the ones down,
Next one.
the respective commissions and departments are not in support of you granting those waivers.
And the reason we can deny these is because the departments have said, no, it's, can we say?
They recommended against it, yeah.
Right.
You could certainly state that. I wouldn't say that's the reason you can
Yeah,
deny
what-
those.
how do we word that?
To the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware of a single Housing Appeals Committee decision that states that a board is required to waive local fees in order to help a project become economic.
Okay.
So I've never seen that. So there's an encouragement for fees to be waived, at least as they apply to affordable units. But I'm not aware of any decision that requires a board to waive fees in order to make.
I mean, the building department fees are for safety and compliance with the code and those types of things, so there's no reason why, I don't see any
Well, not
reason
only
why
that,
we
but
would.
these departments,
sure.
they,
Yeah, if anything,
these departments have
sometimes you need more,
Right.
but.
Yeah, now,
yeah, because somebody has to
we
pay
could,
these
we
departments
could
that
do
are
something with the
responsible.
affordable units, if we wanted.
Said they weren't. He's never seen
So
it.
like-
I would want to
Oh, no,
say that,
I've seen that many times, actually.
Oh, okay, I thought
Yeah.
you just said you had.
What I have not seen is the Housing Appeals Committee require it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
A lot of times, it's part of a back and forth between a board and an applicant.
And I think if this was a different
Where a board wants to
situation.
impose certain conditions that are gonna have an economic impact on a project, one of the things they may say is, well, to help offset, whatever we're requiring of you, we'll waive fees for affordable units with regard to this, this, and this. It's part of a negotiation essentially. That's not at all uncommon. But I'm not aware of any decision that requires you to do it.
So we leave it
I would stick with the denial.
denial and
I
then,
don't think you need to go any further than that.
okay, all right. Good,
An hour and a half,
not bad.
not
Now
bad.
you just wanna give your thoughts about that, dead-end roadway requirement, because one, so, well, you didn't ask me to speak, but I'll speak anyway. I mean, the next phase of this would be, come up with a second draft of Chris's from Paul's office, the first draft comprehensive permit decision with things put in the proper places, and then, based on your discussions on the waivers, come up with with a revision to that original draft. One of the biggies, as you pointed out, was, even though you were only gonna discuss waivers tonight, it would be helpful to the attorneys to get the board's thoughts about that dead-end roadway issue. Anything else you thought was compelling, just to give a general sense. I don't wanna prolong the length of your meeting.
So, yeah, so let's have a discussion on the roadway length. Is it, we heard from the chief and the deputy about 750 feet. The town is really held on planning board things about that. So the question is, what can, without redesigning the project fully, can they comply with this?
I mean, I was thinking about this one because basically what I heard from the fire chief was the way to comply is either, and I should say, it's true that the 750-foot length shows up in the subdivision regulations, but we did ask what's the underlying reason for that distance? And then they said, if it were blocked, that they would have to then carry all of their equipment from essentially Pleasant Street all the way down to try to get to this area. So that seems to me that it's not a, it appears in the subdivision regs, and I understand that we are not applying the subdivision regulations because it's not a subdivision, but the intent behind that is a safety intent, at least with regard to that distance. And frankly, if they said 600 feet is too short or is too long, regardless what the number is, their testimony was that it's not safe. They would either prefer a second means of egress or to shorten it to 750 feet. So I think that we're probably on thin ice if we're going to try to craft a condition or deny the project on that basis. But on the other hand, I personally feel like we're kind of between a rock and a hard place where we have, our fire safety experts in town telling us that this is too long. And so either, we risk appeal, in which case then the Housing Appeals Committee can say that's, don't worry about the fire safety issues, that's sort of beyond them. But on the other hand, we give up entire control over the approval process if it goes that way. So
Well,
it's a tough issue for me personally.
I agree with that, but to me, as far as I'm concerned, that old, to thine own self be truthful. I mean, true. I couldn't in good conscience say that I really think this is okay. I mean, if the board then I would be just one of a number. I certainly would support the board. But I really and truly feel as though, putting all of the other issues aside, this safety is a very big thing. And if I were gonna be living in one of those houses, if I bought one, I would like to assume, or I somehow would like to know, that I was in a safe place. I mean, to think that something could happen, and I could be living in one of those houses and never find out after the fact that my loved one died because da-da-da-da-da wasn't so, and they had to carry all the equipment. I mean, to me, I realize it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. We either lose the appeal or whatever, but I somehow or other, I just feel as though there ought to be some mechanism that we as a board could say, we don't approve of this, but it's beyond our control. I don't know how that happens, but.
I mean, the implications of shortening the road would be potentially, buildings that are 4 times the height that they are, so.
The applicant kind
Yeah.
of blew it off. He didn't even know how long the road was when we asked him.
That's what I'm trying to pull up right now.
He didn't even know how long it was when we asked.
How long Burns
Our
Ave?
butters knew.
Burns
But he
Ave
did not
is
know.
400 and something, 415 feet long, plus the
The private section.
100-foot private section, plus another 350 feet.
One of the abutters
So,
came up with
I guess,
960.
okay, so,
I think, I don't know that we have to decide this issue tonight, but I think people need to think about it.
You don't need to decide this issue tonight. I do want to point out that this is an issue where there is some precedent at the Housing Appeals Committee. And in terms of where you're going with what you're stating right now, it's not precedent that's very helpful to you. There have been 2 cases in HAC history in which a board's decision to either deny a project or condition it, based upon length of single-access roadway has been upheld. All right, and in each of those two instances, they were very large developments, over 200 units, and they had very unique issues with regards to how those single-access roadways were featured, including steep grades, sharp hairpin turns, the width being inadequate, things of that nature. So I actually have open on my screen right now a decision from the Housing Appeals Committee from 2010, and it's the Burley Street LLC versus Wenham Zoning Board of Appeals. And I think that's an instructive case for you. So in this particular instance, it was a 20-unit development. The length of dead-end road was approximately 1,100 linear feet. And there were no particular features with regards to how it was laid out, that were distinctive. It was actually only a 20-foot roadway. And in this instance, the Board of Appeals had actually issued an approval that required a secondary access. And the applicant initially didn't appeal that requirement. And then after doing further investigation, they found out that they were physically unable to provide the secondary access that they thought they could provide. So they came back into the board for a modification, and the board denied that modification based upon actually some input from the fire department, in which they said that this length of single access was too long, it was unsafe. It went to the Housing Appeals Committee, and the Housing Appeals Committee overturned it. So to the extent that you want to consider the length of the dead end, you need something more than simply 750 feet is what we put in our regulations for subdivisions, and we don't want to budge from that. You've got to come up with some sort of site-specific reason as to why 750 is a magic number. I mean, why is 750 okay? Why isn't 775 okay? Why isn't 800 okay? Why isn't 750 too much and 725 is the right number? What happens if you impose that as a condition and the applicant takes the position that he took during the last public hearing, in which he said he could just extend driveways from the end of the public way to be in technical compliance with the provisions of the subdivision rules and regulations? That, I presumably, and I encourage the applicants to actually come in with plans to show that. They chose not to extend the hearing to do that. But that, they may do that as part of a process before the Housing Appeals Committee to show, listen, we can comply with their decision. We can comply with that 750-foot length of dead-end roadway, but it's actually gonna be less safe because it's gonna feature long driveways instead.
Did you take that as there would be like skinny driveways going to each one of the units, or how?
That was what I heard from what the applicant
okay.
was suggesting.
Okay.
And to
Because-
me, that is a much worse
Oh, yeah.
solution than what is proposed in terms of safety. So those are the things that you need to take in consideration as you're making this decision. And it may be that with regards to this particular roadway, there are legitimate reasons as to why you need to limit it in terms of its length. But you need to understand that it has to be very specific to this roadway. It can't simply be 750 is what we allow. We don't grant waivers at the subdivision level. That's not a defense that you can rely upon if this goes to an appeal at HAC.
Well, what about the issue of the fact that the road is not standard, the road around is not standard to Walpole standard? That doesn't matter, I get that. However, the fact that there are all these units there, and there are only 2 parking places, and we know that on any given day, you're not gonna have access all the way around, so would that be enough of a mitigate? No.
The problem is, what is your parking regulation in your zoning bylaws?
2 per unit.
2 per unit.
So you're not allowed
We have
under,
guest requirements
No.
for condos, no?
you're not allowed under Chapter 40B, Section 20 to impose requirements on a subsidized housing development that aren't imposed on an
No,
unsubsidized
but what my
housing.
point was, you can't park on the street. The street is narrow as it is, and
So
a
it-
fire engine couldn't get through there anyway
So
unless
in
they...
which case, the resolution is to actually impose no parking signs, to require them to
Well,
impose
there
them.
are no parking signs, but in the real world, People are gonna park
Well,
there.
in the real world, everybody obeys the rules.
I don't know what world you're living in. It's obviously not the same one
I
I'm
think if
living
we
in.
tried,
From
if
East
we,
Walpole.
if
things
we
are
probably
different
can't.
back
What
in
I'm
the
trying to
day.
point out is that.
No,
you know,
I hear
These
you.
are the sorts of reasonings to support conditions
Yeah.
and denials that the HAC has seen time and time again. And your decision will be, you know, very at risk to being overturned. And then all of these other
Other things go,
components
yeah.
of your decision, all
Yeah.
of the
We've
conditions,
had-
all of the
Yeah.
waiver decisions will be out the window.
I get it.
Oh, that's really helpful to know, because I think to the
I mean,
extent we're,
we could encourage him to shorten it as much as he could,
Yeah, is there a haggle?
but I think if you throw a number at it, it's a problem.
yeah, no, and we can.
Unfortunately, the
we can
point for
recess.
haggling is when
Right.
the hearing is still open.
We did try to ask him how long his road was, and he said he didn't know.
We could point to this precedent in our decision and say, notwithstanding the fact that we heard directly from our, that this is not likely.
And they had a fire department go right before them.
Well,
They were like,
you don't have to
whatever.
either. I mean, it's on new evidence, so if there's an appeal, the Housing Appeals Committee, it would be on new evidence.
Correct.
So you'd call your fire, you'd call the deputy chief, call a fire expert, you know, somebody like that. He'll do this, the developer will do the same. And I tend to agree with Paul that there's probably more likely than not chance that the HAC would overturn your condition.
Oh, I'm sure they
But-
probably would.
You know, having said that, it doesn't mean, you know, that you're not within your rights to impose the condition. You only got evidence at the last hearing
Last hearing.
session, and you asked the deputy chief,
Yep.
and he said, I recommend against, you know, not applying that. But you didn't hear, you know, lengthy, compelling testimony on the issue.
There's nothing that has
Yeah.
been introduced into the evidence that says why 750 feet is the number, other than that's what your subdivision regulation is.
And for that
And we can
matter,
look into, I'm gonna find out, there's a few things, fire safety wise, I think we'll ask if there's a reason.
Sure.
but for that matter, though, the fire department, until the last meeting,
thought there was
had a
another
very
access.
soft, sort of a soft response to us. We're not, you know, if I recall something like, well, there are certain situations, however, we don't have any issues at this time.
Well,
If
they
you
did have the
recall,
other
it-
access.
Yeah, but
at the beginning.
even prior to the access, early on here, when we were asking for response from the various departments, I was surprised when I looked at that, because it was kind of a soft, you know, maybe, but there was no crunch to it. And until this past, the last hearing, and even then, as you say, it wasn't a very robust, compelling, you know,
Well, that's
this is
because we
a
tried to
dangerous.
make sure they knew that that access road was off the board.
As you said, you don't have to decide that issue
Yeah.
tonight. We can certainly do the next draft, you know, with either a placeholder on that issue in a number, or leave it out, and you can certainly
That
bring up
saddens
the
me
topic
that they
again.
would listen to a fire department and judge like that, just as a taxpayer.
They will, you
It
know, you
does, just as a
read,
human.
I think
read
safety,
these
yeah.
Housing Appeals Committee decisions, and
Wow.
sometimes you read through them and you wonder
can.
what just
Sad.
happened, because they go through methodically each condition, and they give the argument and counter-argument, and then they go against the board, and then at the end, they basically say issue the permit.
It's just
And
sad.
there is no, the other problem with it is there's no remand. It's not, oh, you need to consider this more. They say, issue the permit, here's, you know,
Right.
what you're allowed to impose, otherwise issue the permit. And it's very draconian. So you do wanna make sure that you have as reasonable of a decision as you can, you know, for purposes of not having them become your permitting authority.
We have
That's
been
the point.
remanded in the past, and this would be a good.
So, since I was involved in a remand here in the past.
You were, with me.
Exactly, but that was for a proposed modification to the design during the course of the proceedings before the Housing Appeals Committee. So they never got to the
Totally
point of
different.
actually making a decision. They said, all right, you've made changes that the board hasn't reviewed yet, send it back to the board so that they can make that review, and then it'll come back to us.
Yeah.
So that's a different circumstance. When you get to a situation where you have a full hearing process before the Housing Appeals Committee, and then it goes to a decision, they issue their decision, the decision is going to actually tell you that you have 30 days in which to issue a decision consistent with their decision, but then it's gonna go on to say that you're not allowed to impose any additional conditions other than what's contained in their decision, and their decision will have 5 standard conditions, and that's it. So everything else that's contained in your draft decision, anything else that you would consider putting into it, would be go.
And really where the real danger comes in a case like this, because you're not, it looks like you're headed toward an approval with conditions. But where the danger of that comes in to, for now, is to have something enforceable. Because all those conditions that you'll have in your permit about the review of the final plans and conformity with this and compliance with all those conditions sort of goes out the window, because you get that sort of very wide granted comprehensive permit from them. So all these conditions that you're gonna have in your comprehensive permit decision that protect you enforcement-wise, to make sure that you have a project that then you can enforce.
They all go
You're giving up that type of control by letting it, you know, like I say, letting them become your permitting authority.
Yeah.
Because they won't have all those detailed, you know, during construction, prior to building permit, all those conditions that you're gonna have in your permit, all those will go out the window.
Okay, so why wouldn't the applicant automatically just appeal the?
Often it
It's time and money.
Time and money
It
mostly.
is, the cost in going through a full hearing process before the Housing Appeals Committee is gonna be more than 6 figures for them. The time could be 3 years.
The applicant has said out loud he's appealing.
But often you'll see an appeal anyway. And then they wanna see how it comes out with the butters, and so you may very well see an appeal, even if he's perfectly happy with your decision.
I don't think he has.
So your focus is to come up with
To be perfectly
the
happy.
best decision that you can based on the evidence before you, and then we'll worry about all that. when it
And I think
comes up.
that's what we've done tonight. We've taken the first steps and going through the waivers. We've identified which ones are necessary, which ones are reasonable, and we're moving forward with that.
And the point that I was just trying to make was, to the extent you're going to have a condition that is as impactful as that one would be, just make sure it's supported by evidence that is unique to this particular application. You can't just say, this is how we've always done it.
Are we allowed to get any more evidence from the fire department?
You,
The
you,
hearing is
And it-
closed.
not
So we
for
are not.
this, but
But we can do our own homework type of,
no, what it would be is the case before the Housing Appeals Committee will be on new evidence. So you can come up with you can have the deputy chief testify, you can have an expert witness, all of that. But what Paul's pointing out is, so far,
Then we're toast.
nothing compelling has been presented to you other than, okay, we came up with this 750-foot number. The reason is safety, but there
There's
wasn't
no
any
reason.
testimony as to why 600 wouldn't work, 500,
That's what-
800.
And I think that's what we need to find out before we continue this discussion. Why did the town of Walpole choose 750? Maybe there was a reason
Yeah.
for that.
But understand that 700, no matter what, a one length fits all is not going to be something that's upholdable, right? It's going to have to be that
we're gonna need you to engineer.
this length is necessary. We need to hold to this standard
Feels
because of
500.
situations that exist on the ground with regard to this project site.
And the reason I point out about new evidence, if you're thinking that way, but realistically, in your own mind, well, I can't imagine being able to present a compelling case on that. You do have the chance to present a case to them.
Right.
But if, in your mind, you know darn well,
But you're not
you
gonna,
know,
yeah,
you're not gonna get an expert witness from on high to go in and
yeah.
present the compelling case, then treat it realistically.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the 750-foot. Any other conditions we wanted to just
Yeah.
get thinking about those?
Did you want to discuss the additional guest parking spaces? I think during the hearing, you did talk about specific things unique to this site, such as the kind of one-by-one parking, how narrow it is. There's gonna be no, on-street parking.
Right. So, I've gone by other similar-sized condominium complexes in Walpole and looked at their guest parking. And I guess one of the questions is, why not say they need to have parking consistent with the requirements for other 36-unit
So
developments?
I think our peer reviewer has recommended 4 parking spaces, is that right?
Minimum,
Yeah.
or is that a minimum?
Minimum 4.
Well, they provided 4.
They provided
After we
4,
asked, they provided 4.
but there were four initially.
And
And
then,
after the peer review, it
Oh, right.
became
And
Was
then
it
the
8?
peer reviewer said 8.
It was 8, okay, sorry, that's the number I was trying to.
And the applicant said, oh, I can't do that, and he showed him where he could do it. I thought maybe 16 myself,
I would agree.
but,
There was so many units.
hmm,
But then again, where would he put 16?
true, yeah.
These parking spaces, I don't know if there's a
He can definitely
provision
fit
in
it.
our bylaw about parking within the setback, the front yard setback.
But they're not lots,
They're not lots.
so there's no front yard setback from
This
the
isn't a
building.
lot.
Parking is allowed
It has to be.
in the front yard setback, yeah.
Yeah,
Even
And this isn't
for,
a setback.
this is not like this is not parking in front of your house, you know, this is a four-space parking lot, basically.
yeah, but it doesn't, I don't think it follows that.
What about the winter?
Winter?
You can't park
You
May
gotta,
1 to December 1.
you gotta plow 'em.
That reminds me, though, that there was discussion from the fire department that they agreed with modifying this curve.
Yes.
Yeah,
Which,
so they can modify that curve turning, so that the fire apparatus can exit the site without entering in the other lane of traffic. So you'll probably wanna reference that in the conditions.
We don't care about our fire department.
No, but we put it in as a condition.
Yeah.
Well, so that actually would be something within the purview of the fire department as well. So that's something that could not be rejected by the Housing Appeals Committee. They actually the fire department is required to review the final plans before building permits are issued to ensure compliance with the fire code. And the access for the fire vehicles is part of that review.
Okay.
So they're going to have to comply with that no matter what.
Wait a minute, repeat that again, please.
1 minute they like the fire.
Wait a minute, no.
So this is something that's outside of the Housing Appeals Committee's jurisdiction to waive. This is essentially a
Safety.
state requirement. Just like the State Wetlands Protection Act, just like Title V, those are state requirements that are being implemented locally. Well, the fire chief implementing the fire code is the same thing, and the fire code requires that the fire chief or somebody from his department sign off that the fire code access requirements are met. And that's something that they just simply going to have to do. Irrespective of whether you put that into your decision, they have to do it before they can get a building permit. So feel free to put it in
Yeah,
your
we'll put it
decision,
in.
because it can't be disturbed.
Okay. Anything else that we should be looking at for next time? We did talk about hours of construction, because of, it's a school
School
buses,
bus issue.
kids moving around. And we had some ideas of, to avoid the school bus time, so sometime out, like
About the watering down, the bad dirt.
Oh,
8 o'clock in the morning on,
Well, he's got
for,
he's got
for
Burns
safety
on dump.
purposes.
Rick, yeah.
Yeah.
Burden's on dump up there.
And
We
can we,
do-
can we discuss the best way to kind of circulate the draft decision so that it's not getting sent to me and you and George, and maybe we could set a deadline for comments and they can all come to me and then I can distribute.
That's perfect.
Those to
Yes,
you.
you're the keeper of the draft.
I'll be the draft keeper,
Yes.
okay.
You,
As long as someone's doing it,
No,
otherwise it just
It's
gets.
appropriate that it's you.
Okay.
Is it? You don't want it, right?
I don't want what?
To be the keeper of the draft document.
I want George doing it.
No, he's going to be working on the draft, but the actual the updates,
Official copy.
the official copy,
Yes.
so we don't have
Of course.
multiple copies circulating around.
Bad idea, yep,
Okay, so Ashley, we all feed our comments to Ashley,
yes.
And not
Without
to
copying
each
each
other.
not to each other, right?
So sometimes I'll blind copy you all so that you can't accidentally hit reply all and create an open meeting law violation. So I think,
There really shouldn't be a lot of emailing around. You can provide Ashley for comments, conditions that you want to see in there, you think, you need to highlight to her.
Maybe we
It
should.
should all
And
feed to Ashley.
Feed to Ashley, don't copy each other, and then decide at some point, do you want another draft from me back to you, or do you?
so we've tentatively held January 6th for the date to continue this meeting to. So I'm looking at the calendar now. Ideally, because there are so many things in the waivers that we said we would also build into conditions, we'd have another draft out to you, at least a couple of days ahead of that meeting, so we can work through those conditions. And then maybe have one more meeting before the deadline to approve the final decision.
Yeah, I'm gonna be away on the 15th,
Okay.
just so you know, that week.
What's the deadline?
We
Yeah,
have a
have we
hearing on that.
calculated the
You do,
40
yeah.
days?
Yeah,
I'm not gonna be
January
able to be
13th.
there for that.
Oh, gosh.
And it gets a little bit crazy, obviously, with Christmas and New Year's
Yeah.
and
What's the date?
The
Decision
drop
date?
dead,
January
22,
13th.
13?
Oh,
I think it's the 14th, but
I've
we're,
got the 13th.
we're calling it the 13th.
So we
Let's
need
not
to make
play
another
games with
date.
that.
I'm notoriously bad at those
get
calculations, though,
6.
so.
I just do it in Excel.
We will need more than one.
Just plug it in.
Don't know.
So today is the 16th. Do you think we could get a draft of this done by the 20th, by this week?
No.
No, okay.
What day is the 20th of this week?
It's a Friday.
No, I'm sorry, I won't be, no, because it's
Okay.
gonna be,
Yeah.
the draft that I give you back is gonna be quite
Robust.
detailed, yeah.
Okay. So what about the 2nd of January or the 3rd?
Yeah, that would be more realistic.
It'll make the weekend a little bit tight for you, but you'll have a more finished version of the decision.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, right, that's very close to the 6th.
If we get it on Thursday, the 2nd, that would be, or is that,
Thursday, the 2nd would work for you?
yeah,
Yeah,
that gives
okay.
us time to review, so that
Review
we
it.
can,
Yeah,
then we can have a meeting on the 6th
Yeah.
and move forward as we did tonight.
I would try to have a placeholder the week of the 6th, if you need it.
Another,
Possibly, yeah. Because if you, just might want to think about it, because you're only going to have one more meeting to go over the draft decision.
you could do one on the 13th.
Should we have a
Well,
snow
it has to be
day?
filed, isn't it?
No.
Yeah, we'd have to
Maybe
have, the
render that
next day would
decision
have to
by
be
the
the snow
40th
day.
I think it
whatever
doesn't
it is.
file this
So
town
if
clerk. I looked to the Cardwell
6th,
decision
go to the
13th.
7th.
from Woburn. I'll look at that right now,
Yeah,
actually.
only if it's a snow day, but we'll deal with that if it happens.
Is everyone available on the 9th?
Well,
I'm
it-
just,
maybe you don't,
Why don't we just set a day in case? No?
so if everyone's available on the 9th to kind of hold it, on January 6th, we can
Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
That sounds
decide which
good.
way to
6
go.
on the
Yeah.
9th,
Works.
Okay.
All right.
Works.
And then we still have we don't want to be at that deadline.
Yeah,
No,
we have to account for snow and stuff, so we have to.
it's not gonna snow anymore.
Hey, I've driven down here.
Power of positive thinking.
Barely
Yeah,
made it
there
down
you
here
go.
and it continues, I'm here.
Okay, so the next,
So looking at the Cardwell decision, George,
yeah.
an issue in the present case is whether General Laws, Chapter 40B, Section 21 entitles an applicant to a constructive grant of a comprehensive permit when the Zoning Board of Appeals votes to approve the permit with conditions within the 40-day time period prescribed by that section, but does not record its vote in a written decision until after the 40 days have elapsed. We conclude that the board's vote satisfies the statutory mandate to render a decision within the 40-day period, and that the plaintiffs accordingly are not entitled to constructive approval of their requested permit without conditions. So technically, you could Render your decision on the 13th, file it on the 14th, and you would be okay.
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 So let's.
Not encouraging you
Yeah.
to take that approach.
Let's pick
I don't
a
trust
night.
him.
But
I
then
don't
then you
trust
can
him.
record it on the 10th, yeah.
And I also don't like that, yeah, no, that's great, but I've always treated the 40 days, just because I don't like the PR of there's a constructive grant issue
bad
and all that. It makes us.
You're familiar with that.
Almost.
I know I am.
Well, it's the attorneys that look bad then, because then the board is like, well, what in the world were you sitting here for? And
Yeah,
now you're
right.
talking constructive
Not
approval.
enough.
You know, everybody looks bad on something. So. Okay, so we'll continue until January 6th at 6 o'clock. Is that okay for people?
And I'm not gonna be able to be here that night. I will be on my way home from Disney. I'd rather be here.
You suck.
Oh, don't say that.
Whoa.
We appreciate your guidance tonight very
Yeah,
much.
definitely, thank you.
Okay, could I have a motion to continue, or
January 6th, so.
continue to January 6th? Moved by Jane, second by Suzanne.
6 o'clock or
6 o'clock.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, so carried. And could I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting? Moved by Jane, second by Suzanne. All
Wait,
those
we
in
have another item on the agenda.
What?
The inclusionary zoning bylaw, we continued because we got.
Yeah, the inclusionary zone.
You don't
What
even
is
hear, be
that?
quiet.
So,
I got a email copy.
yeah, I took a look at it, we talked about it.
I don't even know what he's talking about.
So-
I don't know what she's talking about.
Inclusionary zoning, it's a proposed zoning bylaw for the town. Ashley's worked with the housing committee.
Partnership.
Housing partnership, and it's, in my own words, it's a way to,
Be proactive.
but also incentivize developments, large developments to include
Yeah.
affordable units.
Affordable units, yeah.
So, and if they choose not to, there's a fund that they can put money into that the town would have. So, I reviewed it. There's a lot of things in zoning bylaws, the devil's in the detail. But overall, Ashley and I talked about this the other day, I didn't think it was bad. I think it's a step in the right direction. But we really have to work out some of the details. So what else?
Yeah, so I think, we went to the housing partnership, that was last week, this is a new week, and went through a lot of the individual things. So they tried to do this during a fall town meeting, it got, continued to spring town meeting, and some of the bigger issues I think have really been addressed. So there's 2 articles we're discussing, and really we're looking for the ZBA to be in support of these articles. As the board that deals with the 40Bs, I think that getting back local control over how we do housing and how we do affordable housing is really important. And this board would be the board charged with administering this bylaw. So I think it's really important that you're all familiar with it, you're all comfortable with it, and you're in support of it.
Now, would this be a mandatory thing?
Yeah, so.
It would be, it's a.
Over 6 units or 12
It would
units,
be
whatever it is.
in the town it would be
Yeah.
a bylaw.
And that's been supported by statute?
So, yeah, at the state level, absolutely. And this is, it's also importantly, it's in the housing production plan that the town approved as a way for us to move towards achieving our affordable housing goal within the SHI 10%. So an inclusionary zoning bylaw in itself isn't gonna get you to the 10%.
No.
However, it can let you maintain that 10%. So if some other projects come in, which there might be, we can get to that 10%, maybe even a little bit more. And then this is written to just kind of sustain that. So as projects move forward, we're adding units here and there. What's proposed here in the inclusionary zoning bylaw has been run through different pro forma measures to make sure that it's something that the market can actually support. So I think that's an important thing to highlight, as we've looked at it in terms of construction costs and acquisition and all of these things, and what's being proposed is very reasonable. Another point I want to make about this is that This is still far more conservative than what you would get with a 40B, which you very well know. So I'm specifically referring to the section, it's section 6 that talks about special provisions for affordable housing. So one thing it does is lower the lot size requirement for that affordable unit. But under state law, you can't treat market rate and affordable different. So what happens is all of the market rate unit lot sizes get added up with that affordable and then divided out. So we've looked at, and I'll just pass these over. We've looked at GIS data for each zoning district and looked at the minimum lot size required. That's on the far left-hand side. And then we've looked at what is actually on the ground, because historically what communities kind of have done is downzoned. So the existing, you have both the average lot size and the median lot size, and then the proposed affordable lot size. And there's different, depending on whether or not it's on sewer. So there's less of a reduction if you're not on sewer, for obvious reasons having to do with septic and so on. But the important thing to really highlight about this is 10,000 square foot lot looks really scary in the rural district, or 7,500 in residential A district, but that number is then added into all the other market rate units and then divided.
So, yes.
So
Everybody goes 2% less.
so the
3%
market
less.
rate lots give a little bit of
Yeah.
their lot.
Yeah.
And what's important that I really want to highlight is that when you look at what the average lot turns out to be after that redivision, it's really close to what's actually existing in Walpole. So it's, yes, giving an incentive because there's a smaller lot involved, but when you talk about existing conditions, it's pretty in line with what we have, which again is far more conservative than what we're gonna get if we keep getting 40Bs.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
I've seen other ordinances where they, instead of dealing with the lot size, they give you basically a bonus development. If you could, build, 10,000 square feet on a lot of this size, if you agree to affordable, you can do 20,000 square feet, something like that. So kind of the inverse of what this is. Was that discussed at all?
It was absolutely discussed. In the first version, there was like you get an extra unit if you do X, Y, and Z. In working with a housing consultant who kind of got the GIS data, looked at what was on the ground, we feel that this is a more kind of reasonable approach for Walpole. In other communities, it makes more sense to say, we'll give you a height bump, and that we're not talking about any height bumps here or anything. So I think that this is a more reasonable approach for this community. So that's on and then within that section too, if you wanna look at it and give me a call later, I know it's kind of late, I'm happy to talk you through the rest of them. There's some parking discussions, and there's some, if you're near a commuter rail or something like that, there's some extra parking things. So if you're gonna provide, for example, a shuttle, if you're gonna build a development and provide a shuttle for folks to get to the MBTA, there's a discussion about a waiver for some of the parking requirements.
Was that in the first draft that came out?
When you say first draft, do you mean in fall?
No, the one that I just read about a week ago.
I don't believe so.
Okay,
This
does
is,
I didn't see
I didn't
that.
see
this is
that.
all, so,
So please forward us the
if
most
you,
recent.
yeah, and that's in your pack, this is what Amy handed out to you.
Oh, it's in the Amy binder?
It's in the stack that Amy
Yeah.
gave on top,
All right, so
so
we should take that on.
Yeah.
if you, and I'll send you the electronic version,
Okay.
and if you wanna look it over and call me with any questions you might have, I'd be happy to walk you through it and talk you, let you know what's going on and what the intention is. And then when this goes forward, to town meeting, we'll bring it back for a formal kind of recommendation on the articles.
Why do I have a blue one?
Anybody have any questions on
Give it.
this,
Inclusionary
housing.
over there,
So wait a minute, it's in this, this is the thing we should take.
everybody
Yeah.
has
Okay.
fifteen
Yeah.
affordable units.
Okay, That being said, anything else, Ashley?
That's all I have. Thanks so much for all your.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we do have a motion to adjourn already made. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstained, so carried. Okay, thank you, everybody. That concludes tonight's zoning board of appeals meeting.
Thank you.